Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. I invite you to take your seats, to silence your cell phones if you haven't done so yet. And I formally welcome you to the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center. There are still people coming in. I think the parking lot is still welcoming more and more cars. We have actually given every single available ticket for this evening. And I want to share with you when was the last time that our main sanctuary was packed like this. It was not Yom Kippur, no. Also, Yom Kippur we have more people. But for International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we welcomed, as we do every single year, a delegation of over 600 students from the local charter school, the Don Sofer Aventura High School, who come to this sanctuary to listen to the testimony of a Holocaust survivor. It was first Anita Karl, then Stella Sonnenschein, and then this year Zoltan Blau. And for me, it is very powerful to see how we honor the legacy of our founders by continuing to promote and to share and to teach the legacy of the Holocaust and of the survivors in a variety of ways, be it by welcoming high school students, both Jewish and non-Jewish, to listen to their testimony, to welcome all of you and these talented musicians to listen to the sound of these violins that survived the Holocaust, and in so many other ways. Honoring the memory of the Shoah is one of the pillars of the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center, and this concert, this event, is one of many ways in which we do this. So it makes me very, very happy to know and to see that in difficult times for our people, when anti-Semitism is on the rise, when the very right of existence of our people is being questioned, we continue to fill sanctuaries, to fill our congregation with music, with memory, and with hope. Rabbi Berkun is going to welcome everyone and to acknowledge several individuals, but I do want to give an applause to Rosita. Rosita, who runs the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center in Dania Beach, was the brain, the mind, and the heart behind this event. She came to us a couple of months ago. She says, I'm bringing these violins to town. Would you like to do something? And here we are. We are very proud of partnering on a weekly basis with different organizations like the one that Rosita leads and many more to promote the culture of our people and to honor the memory of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. Just to share brief words of Torah, it is Beshert that this week's Torah portion, Parashat Tetzaveh, contains one of the very few references to musical instruments in the whole Torah. It's not violins, it's the 72 clappers or bells that the Kohen Gadol, the holy priest, would wear on his ephod, on his breastplate when he wore the priestly garments. And there's a verse in our parsha that says, "Venishma kolo vevo'o el akodesh," and the voice, the music of these bells would be heard as he entered the sanctuary. Since the very beginnings, it has been the tradition of our people to fill our sanctuaries with music, because music makes our sanctuaries holy. And in that sense, I imagine many of you lovers of music, I want to invite you to join our services. Every Friday we have a beautiful musical service with keyboard, with clarinet, with flute, with saxophone. Maybe we'll incorporate a violin very soon, who knows? And music is one of the most beautiful ways in which we connect with our heritage and with God, with the divine. So, Benishma Kolo Bevo'o El HaKodesh, music is heard as we enter our sanctuary. It was the bells of the Kohen Gadol, and is today these holy violins that survived the Shoah and that are going to adorn our sanctuary with their music. Thank you, and Bruchim Abayim.
Yai bye 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 bye. Oh, you know that song? So I think one of the reasons why that melody and that story and that Broadway show, that movie is so connected with us, Fiddler on the Roof, is for many, many reasons. But one of them is that music has a way of penetrating and expressing the Jewish soul in ways that perhaps nothing else does. It speaks right to our heart, and I'm not sure there is another instrument other than the violin that has a way of telling the Jewish people's story, and we are going to immerse ourselves in both the sounds and the history and the legacy of these cherished instruments with these talented musicians, an incredible story. So we are so grateful to you, but of course that song, If I Were a Rich Man, right? Our tradition teaches Ezehu Ashir, Hasameach Bechalko. Who is a rich person in the Jewish tradition? One who is happy with their lot. And we are so grateful and happy to have all of you with us in these very difficult times for the Jewish people, for our brothers and sisters in the state of Israel. And there could not be a more important time for us to continue to be highlighting the history of the Holocaust, as well as to celebrate the survivors and to honor them. Just by a show, I know we have many survivors with us here tonight. If you are a survivor of the Shoah, will you, to the best of your ability, either rise or just give a wave? If you are a survivor of the Holocaust, we want to honor you and recognize you. See, some of you are standing. If you have the koach to stand, we would love that. If not, keep waving. Let's show them our appreciation, our gratitude. They are the jewels on the crown of the Jewish people. Thank you so much. I also see a lot of familiar faces, people who choose to call this synagogue your home. And this is not a shameless plug, but our congregation was founded in large part by the greatest number of Holocaust survivors of any synagogue in the United States of America. We still have many, many here at Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center. And if you are still shul shopping, I don't know how anyone in South Florida in 2024 could still be shul shopping, but if you are, we are open for you to come check us out and visit us any other day of the week. We welcome you, and if you already call this place your home, wonderful. If you have a home, wonderful. And if you want to come be with us throughout the week or for Shabbatot, we welcome you. I want to echo Rabbi Guido's praise of the one and only Rosita Koenigsberg. She can't take it. She's enough. Give her one more round of applause. We love her. And her best first gentleman, Coleman, a Kohen. And we also want to thank a very special family here at ATJC, the Hollow family, Bettina and Jerry, for sponsoring our breakfast reception afterwards and for continuing to support our synagogue over the years and always having a special place in your heart for Holocaust education as they are children of Holocaust survivors. May your father have good health. And may you continue to be strong. And we thank you so much for all of your love. Your machatanim are here as well. So we thank you so much for being with us. And we want to introduce in just a moment one of our own, Michael Putney, a proud member of our congregation and a member of our board. He's also a member of the board of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center. His remarkable career as an Emmy Award-winning journalist has left an indelible mark on the field of journalism, from his early days as a radio reporter to his impactful role as senior political reporter for WPLG Channel 10. His journey is both inspiring and informative, as was his journey to Israel together with his bride, Karen. A couple of years ago, we were blessed to be together in Israel, an experience that I know touched your heart, continues to sit with you wherever you go. He's going to be emceeing our event. We have a few more introductory remarks, and then we will be on with our program. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the one and only Michael Putney.
Rabbi Jonathan, thank you so much. Rabbi Guido Cohen, thank you. Two great spiritual leaders had a tremendous impact on my life, my wife's life, and we love it here at Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center. And welcome to a special evening of music, hope, and history. The history is here in these beautiful instruments which have been lovingly restored by Amnon and Avshi Weinstein in Israel. And we are going to hear them played by these wonderful musicians tonight. This is an encore performance at the Holocaust Documentation Education Center. A few weeks ago, we heard a similar program, and there are now 72 violins, cellos, a viola, which are on display at the HDAC, which is right up the road. I encourage you to go. So let's begin with some patriotic music. We want to begin with the national anthems of the United States and Israel. And to do that, I want to call on Sophia Toledano, who is a senior at the Posnack Center. Sophia's got a wonderful voice. She has sung for us in the past to open these programs. Sophia is going to sing, obviously, our national anthem and the Haktiva.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you. Now I'll be singing Hatikva. I hope while I'm singing, everyone can keep the hostages in mind, those whose situations are unclear, and those who we have gotten back and have experienced some unforgivable acts. Thank you. Golod balefa denima nefesh Yehudi omia ulfatem Yisrael gadima ay letrion Sophia od lovta tikvatenu hatikvat patchnot alpaim liotam hoshi be'atzenu eretz Zion ve'Yerushalayim
לי אותם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Thank you.
Sophia, beautiful. Thank you so much. At this point, we're going to, unfortunately, not be able to hear from Father Pat O'Neill, who is the chairman of the board of the Holocaust Documentation Education Center. He got caught in traffic. Maybe he got caught in the parking lot, but I certainly hope Father Pat will join us. He is a remarkable man. He has been involved in the HDEC for 45 years. Many of you probably know he and Sister Trinita Flood were some of the co-founders of the HDEC. And again, the 72 violins are on display. There are wonderful photographs at the HDEC, which is in Dania Beach. It's nearby. It's a very moving exhibit, and I really urge you to go there. They also have a rail car that was used to take Jews to Auschwitz, and they have a tank which was used to liberate the camps, and they're very moving. This wonderful exhibit, the Violins of Hope, really depends so much on Avshi and Amnon Weinstein, father and son. They are artists. They have repaired these lovingly. These instruments were taken from Jews. They were surrendered. One was thrown off a rail car on the way to Auschwitz. Another was hidden in the snow in Poland to save it. And yet another was saved in a concentration camp because the Nazis love having the Jewish prisoners play, and so that violin was saved. But every one of these violins has a story, and they represent hope and despair, but mainly hope and resilience and strength. And we are so fortunate tonight that we are going to hear them played. I do want to take a second to thank the generous sponsors who've made the Violins of Hope exhibit possible. And they include the state of Florida, Department of State, Division of Cultural Affairs, Florida Council on the Arts and Culture, the Broward County Board of County Commissioners, JM Family Enterprises, very generous institution, the Share Family Foundation, also incredibly generous, Susie Edelsberg, we thank her, the Florida Peninsular Insurance Company, Stephen and Nora Weiss, Broward County Mayor Nan Rich and her husband David, Nan a former state senator and a leader, Irving and Evelyn Denmark Philanthropic Fund, the Lawrence Denmark, and then Yuki Denmark. So those are the people who have helped make this available, but we thank all of you for coming out on a beautiful, cool winter evening in Florida to hear these wonderful musicians. I want to introduce to you the dynamo who is the president and the leader of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center. Without her, so much wouldn't have been accomplished. I think it is at 2,700 histories have been collected of survivors, and they're recorded. They will never be forgotten. Their stories are preserved forever at the HDEC, and it is in large part thanks to its president, Rosita Koenigsberg. Rosita, please come up.
Wow. Thank you so much, Michael, for the lovely introduction. It is really, really wonderful to be here with all of you this evening for the encore performance of Violins of Hope. I'd like you all to give yourselves a big, wonderful applause, because without you here, this program does not happen. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, really. This evening, as Michael has already mentioned, we will hear instruments that were once played under unimaginable circumstances in the concentration camps, in the ghettos, and in the forests. They were played by European Jews, a few of whom survived, most of whom perished. And although these violins were destined for silence, these violins have been brought back to life by 3 generations of the Weinstein family, all master luthiers, that is violin makers, with workshops today in Israel and in Turkey. Tonight, we are so fortunate to have with us Avshi Weinstein, a 3rd-generation Israeli violin maker, a son of Holocaust survivors, and for those of you who may not know, which has really blown my mind on many occasions, he is the grandson of Asoil Bielski, who was the 2nd in command of the Bielski brothers' Partisan Resistance Fighters Brigade. And also with us tonight, and we are also very honored, to have the last surviving Bielski brother, Aaron Bielski. Aaron, if you can, would you stand, please? And we really want to recognize you and thank you. Thank you. A little later on in the program, you will hear the Partisan Lied, Zognet Kemel as de Geest im letzten Weg. And that particular song was sung in my home, was sung in many of the 2nd-generation homes, which at the end is the ultimate, which means we are here, we are not going anywhere, we are here to say, Wir sind da. Absolutely. Avshi Weinstein began working with his father in their Tel Aviv atelier in 1998. Avshi and his father are known to be brilliant violin makers and restorers, bringing the Violins of Hope project to life and keeping it going is personal for the Weinsteins. Their own history with the Holocaust is also a story of unfathomable pain and horrendous losses of family members. They have lovingly and passionately dedicated over 20 years of their lives restoring, reviving these recovered precious violins from the Holocaust. These instruments have not only survived, but thanks to the Weinsteins, have come alive once again as powerful performing voices of remembrance for audiences all over the world. These Violins of Hope are now played in concerts around the world, such as in Jerusalem, Istanbul, Paris, London, Sion, Switzerland, Monte Carlo, Rome, Berlin, New Orleans, Philadelphia. It came to us from Pittsburgh, New York, Cleveland, and Chicago. And tonight, we are so thrilled and so proud to add the Aventura Turnberry Jewish Center to this impressive listing. Thank you. As my father of blessed memory, he used to sit in this sanctuary, 10 rows to my left, in the aisle seat, almost every single Shabbat. He used to tell me, Rosita, he said, always remember that as long as there is someone to tell the story, there is life. And as long as there is someone to listen, there is hope. So as we listen to these violins of hope, let us not forget that these violins not only represent the tragic and horrific past, but moreover, they represent the survival, the courage, the fortitude, the resistance, the resilience, and above all, the hope of a people, the Jewish people, that no matter what, we will survive and thrive and sing and dance in our blessed homeland, Am Yisroel Chai. It is truly a pleasure and a privilege to invite you, Avshi, to the podium, and he will introduce this evening's very special performance. Avshi Weinstein.
Thank you very much, Rosita, and thank you all for coming. I heard that there were some good amount of traffic accidents, so I do appreciate it. Coming from a city like Istanbul, trust me, you guys don't really know what traffic is. We're going to have two violinists and a violist tonight. My wife, Seville, will play violin. Our very, very close friend, Bester, will play viola. And Miriam, whom some of you probably know, will be the second violinist. So let's start. Good. So why a Greek piece? As we all know, the war in Europe was going all around Europe, and most of you don't really know, but my father is kind of a collector. And a collector means he would put his hands on almost everything he can find. One of the things that he bought many, many years ago was a lira creta. It's a kind of triangle-shaped instrument played with a bow. Some would say maybe one of the ancestors of violin, but again, who really knows? And he kept it in our workshop in Tel Aviv, and we still have that one here in Tel Aviv still. And one day, one of my parents' friends, who was a Greek Orthodox archbishop, he came to the workshop and he saw that lira creta. And I mean, he's Greek, so he was very interested. He took the instrument in his hands and he started reading the label, which is inside, and he simply fainted. He fainted because the guy who made this instrument was his cousin. A cousin which was caught by the Nazis, skinned alive for being a member in the Greek underground. Now, the very first violin that you will hear today, this is the last violin that we got to our collection just in November, last November. It belonged to a person named Ole Dahl, who was a Danish violin maker and a member of the Danish underground. You probably heard about what the Danish people did during the war. They saved probably 99% of all the Jews in Denmark. They literally put them on boats, sent them to Sweden, saving their lives. 7,000 people, give or take, I think, were saved. Ole was one of the people who helped. He was later on a member in the Danish underground. When the war ended, he came here to the United States, and many years later, he opened his own workshop in Bloomington, Indiana. As far as I know, he probably met my father once or twice, but they had no idea of each other's past. So the very first piece, a Greek song. So we all know what happened in 1933. The Nazis came into power. One of the very first things they've done was to make it impossible for Jewish people to live in Europe. Bronislaw Huberman, who was one of the best violinists of the time, when he saw what was going on in Europe, he wanted to try and help Jewish musicians, and his solution was to start an orchestra in Palestine, in Israel. Israel, of course, was under the British mandate, and you couldn't just pack your things, go and say, "Hi, I'm here." So he had good friends in the British government who helped him get certificates, but orchestra, being an orchestra, it's a very, very lucrative business. It is losing millions of dollars every year, so someone has to finance it. He came here to the United States, and with the help of his good friend, Albert Einstein, they raised money, and they started the orchestra. He auditioned all over Europe, and if you look on the first programs of the Palestine Orchestra, you see the name of the musician, and then what was his or her position. Before that, this was the leader of this and the leader of that. They took all the leaders of all the best orchestras in Europe, brought them to Israel, and put them under one conductor. Trust me, not easy. Many of those musicians, they came from Germany and Austria. They had very, very good German-made instruments. We all know what happened during the war, and after the war in 1945, when survivors started coming, nobody wanted to touch anything German. Cars, goods, electronics, musical instruments. Many of them came to my grandfather and told him something very simple: either you're going to buy this instrument from me or simply destroy it. My grandfather and my grandmother immigrated in 1938 from Vilna. My grandfather was from a small Jewish family of 11 brothers and sisters. One of his brothers survived. My grandmother had 7 or 8 brothers and sisters. None of her family survived. We don't know how many because they never, ever talked about it. I can show you in our workshop, we have a suitcase full of letters from their families before the war, begging them to try and get them certificates, which they couldn't. My grandfather knew that he lost all his family and all his wife's family, my grandmother's family, and still he bought the instruments he could, knowing that he will never be able to sell them. Now, being a very enthusiastic Zionist, he didn't keep books, so he wouldn't have to pay taxes to the British government. So unfortunately, we don't really know the people he bought it from, the actual names, but we know the story. And the viola that you will hear tonight is one of those instruments. And you have to understand one thing. Some of the German violin and bow makers, they really helped Jewish musicians, either by buying the instrument from them, giving them money so they can get the money and run away, and sometimes even hiding them at home. We have a very good friend, a violin maker in the Netherlands, and his father was also a violin maker and a cellist, and they were hiding a Jewish pianist at home. And one day, the Gestapo commander came to him, said, "Listen, tonight we are going to have some chamber music. Why don't you join us?" He said, "Sure." And the guy said, "And bring the pianist with you." This is our friend's mother. She survived. They got married. There are lots of stories. I'm not going to talk about Avinu Malkenu, Rabbi. I think this is your job. I would leave it to you. I'm sure you will recognize the music. It's an arrangement that a very, very close friend of us, Jihad Ashkin, made. Really, really hope you enjoy it. The violin that you're going to hear was played in the main orchestra, in Auschwitz I, in the main camp of Auschwitz. And like everybody knows, the Nazis used and abused music in many, many different ways. The Auschwitz Orchestra played every day in the morning when the inmates had to go out to work, every day in the evening when they all had to come back. And in many times, people who died during the day's labor, they were piled just in front of the orchestra. They had to play in rain, in snow, starving, shaking. And if they wouldn't play, the person who owned this violin, he survived. He met a person named Avraham Davidovich, who was working for one of the Jewish aid relief agencies after the war, sold him the violin, in my opinion, for an outrageous price of $50, which is really a lot of money for such an instrument in those times. But this was the only money he had in his life. This is how he restarted his life. And like every good art, the Nazis did confiscate all the very good instruments. What we have today is the really simple stuff that they let the Jewish people play. So Avinu Malkenu. And yes, you can sing with us. We recognize lots of the music tonight. I hope you enjoy. The violin that you are about to hear belonged to a woman named Violette Silberstein. She was a young girl living in France, and her mother pushed her to play the violin. She wasn't really sure why, but being able to play the violin saved her life. The piece that you are about to hear was the piece that Violette was auditioning to go into the women orchestra in Birkenau, Auschwitz II. Yes, there was a women-only orchestra in Birkenau, and the first time that Violette auditioned, she was auditioning in front of a Russian lady who was leading the orchestra, and she was not accepted. So we will hear the piece, and then we will go on with the story. So now we get to a tricky point, because as you all heard, my Uncle Aaron is here and I'm supposed to talk about the Bielski, so I have to be very careful about what I say, otherwise my uncle is going to beat me. So my grandfather was Asoel Bielski, my grandmother Chaya Bielski. The violin that you are about to hear, one of the violins that you are about to hear, it has this beautiful Star of David in the back, and it is dedicated to my grandparents. Now, the Bielskis lived in what was then Eastern Poland. Today it's Belarus. And when the war started, the Russians came, and in June 1941, the Nazis came. My grandfather and his brothers, they lived in a small village somewhere. Now, anyone seen the movie Defiance with Daniel Craig, Liv Schreiber, and Jamie Bell? Good. So I'm going to destroy a few things from the movie. You remember there was a very beautiful scene of a wedding in the movie, right? Never happened. The true story is my grandmother, again, coming from a small Jewish family of 12 kids, she was the youngest, very spoiled girl. My grandfather was, again, even smaller one, 11 kids. He was in love with my grandmother before the war. She didn't want to get married to a village boy. She's the youngest of 12. Mommy's favorite, she has to get something better. But when the war started, they made a deal. The deal was that if he saved her and her parents, she will marry him. And he did. Now, they lived for 3 years, basically behind enemy lines. They were hunted by the Nazis, they were hunted by the locals, they were hunted by the Polish partisans. The Russian partisans didn't really love them as much. But because they were fighting alongside with everybody and giving them some benefits as working, repairing their weapons, and doing other works for different partisans, they stayed alive. Now, in the beginning of the movie, there is a scene that they go to a house of a person who gave up few Jewish people to the local Gestapo, and they kill him and all his family. In 1993, big portion of our family, they went to the same place. They went to Belarus, and one of my cousins, he took a video, and you see that when they go to that house, or very close to it, they all started whispering. And this was a true story. They killed the guy with his family and burned the house down. But after that, no one raised their hand on any Jewish person running away from the ghettos in those areas. In July 1944, when they were released by the Russians, 1,232 Jewish people marched out of the woods. My grandfather, unfortunately, was drafted into the Russian army. Later on, he was killed. We don't know when and where. And my grandmother, after she gave birth to my mother, when the war finished, she decided that living in the heaven of what was then communist Russia is not exactly her dreams. She took her parents, my mother, went all the way to Western Germany, and after about 1.5 years in a DP camp, moved to Israel, where she basically stayed for the rest of her life. So this is very, very short about the Bielski partisans. The other violin that you are going to hear, this is the first instrument that we got with the story concerning the Holocaust. My father spoke on a radio show that started basically after the war. He spoke in 1999, many, many years later, yes. But this was a very simple radio show. We know that in 1945, Facebook, Instagram, all these things were not even a dream. And how did people know what happened to their family? This radio show, every single person in Israel listened. It was very simple. You would go on air, say, my name is this and that, coming from here and there. I'm looking for my mother, my father, my sister, my brother. If you were lucky enough, you left a phone number, if not an address. And this was how many, many people learned what happened to their relatives. In 1999, my father spoke on the same show, and he asked if people had instruments which belonged to survivors, would they please come and share it. The next morning, around 9 o'clock, I got a phone call from a person named Nadir Krongold, who had his uncle's violin. It's a very interesting and very unique instrument. It has a small Star of David on the back, and the label is in Hebrew. And the label says, I made this violin for my loyal friend, Mr. Shimon Krongold, Warsaw, 1924, Yaakov Zimmerman. Shimon Krongold was a wealthy industrialist in Warsaw before the war, and when the war started, he ran away. Unfortunately, he died in Tashkent, and in 1947, one of his best friends brought the violin to the Krongold family in Jerusalem. This is the only thing that they have from their uncle. The violin and a small photo of his playing on it at home. Now, some of you might know the name Ida Handel, one of the very best violinists that we had. When I met her in the 90s, she said she was 70, but about 15 years later, she was about 65, so most probably she wasn't 70 when we met. She told me and my father that she remembered going to Yaakov Zimmerman, the violin maker in Warsaw before the war. She thinks he was probably 70 years old, and as we know, people in this age usually did not survive. Now, one of the best Jewish violinists of those times, the leader of the Berlin Philharmonic, I forgot his name right now, which will come in a second, he was also coming from Warsaw, and Michel Schwalbe. And he told my father that he remembered that he was coming from a very poor family. All his instruments were given to him free by Yaakov Zimmerman, and his violin lessons were done at Shimon Krongold's house because his parents were too ashamed to bring the violin teacher home. Now, my grandfather finished the Vilna Conservatory as a violinist, and before immigrating to Palestine, he realized there were lots of very good musicians in Israel, and he might not be able to make a living as a musician, so he learned a little bit of violin maintenance and repair with Yaakov Zimmerman. So we are going to hear the partisan song. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
For the next song, I have to start with the violin story because there is a very it's not that easy. This is, in my opinion, maybe the strongest song ever been written in Hebrew, Eli Eli. And the story of the violin, we all know that Jewish people, it's quite a small cult, right? Jewish musicians, even a smaller cult. And Jewish musicians living in Vilna, it's a very small cult. This violin belonged to a person named Max Becker, who was a Polish soldier as well. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks into the war, he became a POW. Now, in those times, the Nazis still did not separate Jewish POWs from other POWs, and he stayed with his unit. And when they realized that he is a violinist, they gathered some money between them and bought him a violin. He played in many different working camps, and later on, when he was finally released and he survived, he arrived to a DP camp in France, and they established a DP orchestra. It was called She'erit Pleta, let's say the leftovers, basically. They played for many DP camps all around Europe. And when Rubinstein came to play some concerts in Europe, he insisted to play 2 concerts with the orchestra. Now, Max Becker got married to a woman whose brother, Wolf Domarshkin, was a very known musician in Vilna. And my father, like I mentioned, he is a collector. He found a concert program from 1936 from Vilna when Wolf Domarshkin was the conductor and my grandfather played viola. So they did know each other. Like I said, very, very, very small count. So we are going to hear. And by the way, Rabbi, you talked about Fiddler on the Roof. The last time I met Yitzhak Perlman, he told me that he still remembers the day my grandfather gave him his first violin. Perlman lived the street behind our workshop, and he still remembered the day that my grandfather gave him his first, I think it was half-size violin. Very small one. The reason we chose to play Eli Eli is, now it's my Rosita story. I talked with Rosita and we tried to think about which music we should play, I said that we always try to have music which has relevance or dedicated to someone or some people from the war. And we all know Elie Wiesel. We all know his story, his book, The Night, where he's talking about his friend Julik, that during the death march, one of the nights he took out his violin, played some Beethoven, and in the morning they found him dead and the violin broken. So I told Rosita, maybe we should play some violin, Beethoven piece. And Rosita told me that she was on the first March of the Living with Elie Wiesel, and he was supposed to be the note speaker. And just before him, there was a woman who sang Eli Eli. And after she finished, he came up to the podium and said, after a song like that, I cannot talk. Thank you very much. So this was the reason why we chose Eli Eli. Second Rosita story is the reason that we have a small change of the program. We are going to hear Schindler List now. And the two violins that you're going to hear is this very beautiful violin with the Star of David. Those instruments were made in a place called Schönbach. And according to the day of the year, then you knew which country it was, either Germany or the Czech Republic. They made many different ornamented instruments with Stars of David, with crosses, anything else that you can think of. It's mother of pearl. These are really, really, really simple instruments. They were sold here in the United States in Sears, if I remember right, for the amazing amount of money of $5. Now, in Eastern Europe, almost every single Jewish family had someone playing violin. Yud Lamed Peretz, the very famous author, he said, how do you know how many males you have in a Jewish family? Go in the house, count the violins, here is your answer. It was very cheap, very easy to learn a little bit of tunes, and this was an amazing culture all over Eastern Europe. And this culture was extinct by 1945. The klezmers, also the professional klezmer bands, they had one problem. Most of them, if not all of them, were self-taught. They didn't know how to read and write music, and they couldn't play in the orchestra. Many, many, many of them died. And almost nobody played klezmer music in Europe after the war. The second violin that you will hear belonged to a person named Pavel Haas. He immigrated with his family from Germany to the United States just before the war. And like many other Jewish people, he joined the US Army when the war came to the United States. He went through Camp Ritchie. Camp Ritchie was a special camp for intelligence officers and soldiers to become frontline investigators. And when I got the violin from his son, one of the documents that he sent me was a document saying that this person had this and that violin, blah, blah, blah. And of course, like a good old Nazi document, it had lots of stamps. One of them said, this place is Jewish free, Judenfrei. Pavel Haas was part of the army. He fought. He survived. And unfortunately, I never met him, but we have his violin that he played on through his life. So the next song, the next thing is Schindler List. And I'll tell you a small thing that a good friend of mine told me. We all know the movie and the music. Now, John Williams and Steven Spielberg, they did a few gigs together like Star Wars and other things, right? And when Steven Spielberg, when he finished the movie, he called John Williams and said, listen, I want you to come and write the music. So William said, okay, I need to see the movie. He had a private screening. He said, I need to think about it. Took a long walk. Later on called Spielberg and said, listen, I can't write the music. I'm not good enough. And Spielberg told him, you're right, but all the better ones are dead. So we have the Schindler List. So my mistake. Haas is going to come in the next piece. Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. you can sing with us, please do. The other violin that you will hear belong to Nati Leo, who together with her husband and other friends, she was a part of an underground in the Netherlands, saving many, many, many kids, taking them to different places, making sure they are fine. Many kids who survived all their life to Nati Leo and her husband and their friends in the underground who helped them survive. So Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. We are not done yet. So the last piece, which is not on the program, yesterday I got an SMS from Rosita saying, "Can you do this piece for us, please?" And as many of you know, when Rosita is asking, it's not a really "can you," it's "would you," it's "you will." So when you will hear the music, you know what the piece is, but I will tell you a little bit about the violins. The violin that Miriam is playing is one of the first that we got to the collection. Now, as many of you know, many survivors never told their stories. One day, a lady comes to the workshop. She says, "My father is turning 90 years old. He wants to play his violin again. What can I do?" I'm looking on the violin. My father is looking on the violin. And we tell her, "Listen, lady, honestly, we can repair it. It's not a problem. It's going to cost you so much money. It doesn't make sense. Get him another violin. It's going to be a better instrument, cheaper for you, happier father." Win, win, win. She's happy. She goes home, says, Dad, I'm going to get you another violin. It's going to be better, nicer. You're going to love it. He starts crying. He says, no, you don't understand. I want my violin. Now, unlike many people, she knew the story of her father and his violin. She even wrote a book about it. So she came back to the workshop and told us the story. Her father lived in Romania with his family, and we all know the Romanian government, which side of the coin they were, the wrong one. And when they joined the Nazis, they decided that the best way to get rid of the Jewish population in Romania is send them to Transnistria. They will die there. There is not enough food. Feivel and his family had to go there. Took them almost 3 weeks. They found a place in the ghetto, and he ran into a judge he knew from his hometown. And the judge told him, he said, listen, I remember that you play violin. I have this very beautiful old Italian violin. Why don't you take it, play, and if you get some food, you'll come and share it with me and my sisters. So if someone gives you a beautiful Ferrari, what do? Take it for a spin. A few days later, he had a little bit of extra food, came back to the judge's apartment, if you can call it that, in the ghetto, knocked on the door, nobody opened. In the end, he went in, he saw that he was too late. The judge and his sisters couldn't bear the conditions in the ghetto and committed suicide. He kept the violin, went on playing for the locals, getting a bit of food, water, firewood, and this is how Feivel and his family survived. Until the Romanian police heard about this beautiful treasure. And they gave him an offer he can't refuse. Family or violin. He gave the violin. Now many of you, I can see the faces, you have kids, right? Your kids got married probably, hopefully. And one of the locals, he came to Feivel sometime later, said, listen, my daughter is getting married. She wants you to play in her wedding. Feivel said, well, I'd love to do it, but I have a small problem. I don't really have a violin. Can't play. But that's the daughter we're talking about, right? So they went around and found that violin. And this is the violin Feivel played for the rest of the war, saving 16 family members. And like I said, when he was turning 90, we repaired his violin, and you've never seen a happier child than Feivel the day he got his violin back. He was 90 years old. He couldn't play much, unfortunately, but he would take the violin every day out, talk to it, play a little bit, until a few years later, unfortunately, he passed away. Now, the other violin is more important today than in many, many years. This is a violin that my father made, and he dedicated it to Yitzhak Rabin, who signed inside. We went to see Yitzhak Rabin when he was prime minister in 1993. My father dedicated to Yitzhak Rabin after the Oslo Peace Accords. And trust me, you had some security here. Going into the prime minister's office, it's a bit more difficult. But we made it there. He gave us 10 minutes. It took about 1 hour. And he signed inside. And this is the second violin that you will hear today. And yes, you'll recognize the music. And of course, you can sing with us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wow, wonderful. And let's thank the musicians. They are Seville Weinstein, Besti Tikrans Modiri, and Miriam Balas. Wonderful performances. And the Violins of Hope exhibit at the Holocaust Documentation Education Center through April 14th. The information is in your programs. And now, thanks to the Holo family, we encourage you, invite you to move into the next hall for a dessert reception. Thanks very much.
Wonderful.